I believe we can change our communities one youth at a time. I believe new ideas can help us push beyond the norm. I believe science can help us unlock the unknown. I believe art can help us discover who we really are. And it is that belief that inspired celebrated entrepreneur and visionary in his own right, the late Dr. Anthony N. Sabga, Chairman Emeritus of the Ansa McCall Group of Companies, to create the Caribbean Awards for Excellence. Established in 2005, it is one of the most prestigious awards in the region, designed by and for Caribbean people, spanning 20 countries across the region. So come journey with us as we tell the stories of the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellence 2020 laureates. Judged by an esteemed regional eminent person selection panel, which consists of 11 distinguished persons from the Caribbean who have made significant contributions of their own. This event awards 4 outstanding pioneers in the fields of entrepreneurship, arts and letters, science and technology, public and civic contributions. One of those pioneers is Dr. Olivene Burke, Director of Mona Social Services of the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, the 2020 laureate for public and civic contributions, whose story started with humble beginnings.
So I grew up in the Hannatown section of Western Jamaica. And like the Greater Augustown and the various communities in which I work now, it was a violent community. I can remember my family occupying 2 rooms in 6 of the 7 rented places in my 12 years of early life. 1 room was a bedroom for my parents, and the second, where my sisters and I were, served as both a bedroom for us and the living and dining room as well. The type of food we ate, that the food was perhaps seen as poor, but we were always happy. The violence got so bad in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, my parents decided that they would leave everything behind and start all over again. And so we relocated to Vineyardtown, that is in Kingston 3. And that became the turn of my life and the life of my other 4 sisters. I have no brothers.
Despite the circumstances of her early life, Dr. Burke persevered and eventually took an interest in teaching. Her first job was at a secondary school that was very similar to the school she attended.
At the school, again, most of the persons, the students from the school, they were from the Augustown, Papine, Kingston 6 area. Poor family background. A lot of them suffering different kinds of trauma. And I said, oh my God, you know what? I'm going to tell them my story, to use me as the model, to inspire them to want to be like or better than me. I know that my work on the developmental path was my true calling. Now that I can actually see the lives that have been changed both in my family and my previous workplaces, as well as the hundreds of others that I interact with on a daily basis through training, as I mentioned, mentoring, motivating.
Dr. Burke's ambition drove her to excel, and it was inevitable that she would rise to the top of her profession and move beyond it. She started as a high school teacher and then moved into academia.
Then I came to the University of the West Indies in 2001. About 3-4 years after the late Professor Barry Chevons, he was in this group called the Research and Policy Group, and his office was just across from mine. And so from time to time, I would volunteer with Professor Chevons in the Huey Township project. It was focusing on lowering unemployment and also lowering crime and violence. So unfortunately, Professor Chevons passed in 2010, November 2010. However, the principal said, okay, Olivene, this is what we're going to do. You are going to continue the program. Now, I was not ready for that because Professor Chevons is a staple in and of himself in the community. That would have been big shoes to fit. So I had to change to have the persons develop their confidence in one, a woman, and two, in me, and three, in the university in and of itself.
The university's goal is to revitalize Caribbean development. And people think of it as economic development, but we're also interested in social development, and the Mona Social Services is our major outreach in terms of the social development of communities around us.
We expanded the program using the 6 pillars: education, health, entrepreneurship, reduction in crime and violence, and sports. So we were using now a holistic approach to social intervention in the Greater Augustown. And I must say, we had to take that approach, because you can't look at crime and violence reduction without doing something about the education level. If you can't reason things out, then you're going to be acting things out.
Through the involvement in this program, Dr. Burke draws on her own past to help guide others, giving them an opportunity to elevate themselves beyond their unfortunate situations.
Dr. Burke provides what you call a fixed asset, because you know that especially in inner city communities, the so-called dons, they provide guns, they provide weed for the youths, and they give them probably like, they just give them a name, or give them like a food and all of that. But Dr. Burke provides a platform for us to be educated, and this education lasts us for a lifetime.
The reason for this is that Dr. Burke's values, taught by her parents, have triumphed over the despair for those communities.
I grew up not to be ashamed of who I am, what my background is, because that background helps to inspire a lot of persons.
But the ability to bring change and challenge the status quo is an attribute of extraordinary people. They can be found in the inner cities of Jamaica or the hinterlands of Guyana, where 2020 Laureate for Entrepreneurship, Andrew Mendes, Managing Director of Fafa and Mendez Limited, has redefined the operations of the business sector.
I never like to think that I challenge the status quo, but in my upbringing, I guess I was never faced with the status quo. You know, in particular, I would say that my young years going into the interior, you know, I like off-road driving. Trying to get to the south of, getting down to the south of Guyana, where the roads were horrendous, and you were faced with situations that you never even expected. You had to think on your feet, you had to face the challenges and figure your way through, because there was no one else really there to help you find your way through. In a sense, I'm wired, and I guess I like change. You know, as Peter Drucker said at Harvard Business School, the only constant in life is change. And I guess the status quo, you know, in a sense, really does actually irritate me. So I'm always looking at changing things. Sometimes, you know, beyond, I think, sometimes what most people can handle. You know, a lot of times I'll go into sawmilling operations, logging operations, timber business, and a lot of sectors in Guyana in terms of even how businesses are run. And you try to get to the heart of, okay, I get an understanding, okay, why do you do this way, or why do you do things a certain way? And, you know, the scariest answer for me has always been, it's because we've always done it that way. That's one. And the second thing is I find is that also people make the comment that, you know, well, this is Guyana and that's how it works here. You know, for me, that's consigning ourselves to mediocrity.
Mr. Mendez's whole professional life has been the application of that philosophy to the way of life in Guyana.
I mean, I went all over the U.S. for over a period of 3-4 years, and I saw 15, 20 different operations and tried to get an understanding of what they do, how they do it, and why they do it. We did a drive with my partner twice from Indianapolis in Indiana all the way down to northern Alabama. On each occasion, we stopped at 10 different logging and sawmilling operations to see what they do, how they do it, and to try to get an assess, okay, what's appropriate for here and what maybe may or may not work here. But we tried to look at what the similarities were and what we could use here. We then brought a lot of that technology and a lot of those approaches to Guyana. Again, when we came here, we were met with, oh, that's the U.S. and that can't work here. They only deal with softwoods, and this is hardwoods, and this is selective logging, and it's tropical rainforest. Well, guess what? It does work because the underlying principles are essentially the same. You're trying to drive efficiency by the efficient handling and movement of material. And the same principles that apply there apply here. Yes, the wood is heavier. Yes, the wood is harder. But those things can be addressed in different ways. The type of blade that we use on the sawmills increases the efficiency.
But perfectionism has no national origin, and Mr. Mendez was determined to apply it to his own reality.
I actually developed that blade profile and then got Woodmiser to make it. And then what happened is they found that it doubled the sharp life and increased production by 50% even in the US. So now it's become actually their second most popular selling blade in the US and was cutting much faster. And then I took that profile and I went to Woodmiser and I sort of twisted their arm to make it. And the rest is history, so to speak.
Years of determination to bring change to the industries he worked in has yielded results. His practices have brought him success. His community has taken notice and now seeks to learn from him after he has made his mark with driving Farfar and Mendez Limited to be the first company in Guyana to diversify into the oil industry.
I think Andrew's been very interesting in that he saw the opportunity going on in Guyana, and he realized that the way to do that was a lot different than others. First, he really tried to understand how his business could benefit. When Andrew started, there were no companies working offshore in Guyana. That was what we thought a long stretch would take a while as the center. In about 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, they've jumped. They're on the FPSO, they're working offshore. I think that's an accomplishment not only for Farf and Mendez, it's the fastest we've seen a transformation.
Andrew's innovations and ideas have actually put Guyana on the map at an international level, but his leadership extends to more than just financial gains. One such example is the employment opportunities that his company provides for residents in the communities.
It has given opportunities for up to 140 people from the community to work on the land. It gives them steady income year on year. You know, they pay NIS, and they also have private health insurance, so that for them and their families. So we employ a significant number of women in the operation here. And that sort of fits in with Farfan and Mendez as a whole, in that as I mentioned in the write-up, over 50% of the managers in the company are women.
It really takes a special individual to be able to put their ego aside, to actually reach out to others, and to really accept what they have to say. And I'm sure he processes it. He might speak to multiple people and then figures out, okay, this is what I can depend on, this is what I can use in my decision making, and then move forward. Being able to set aside your ego and access what the world has to offer you is something I really wish people would pay more attention to and borrow it from Andrew.
Ironically, his penchant for different personalities is a personality trait which defines Mr. Mendez.
I just like to get up every morning and, you know, you're faced with a problem or you're faced with a challenge and overcoming those challenges. I mean, that's what wakes me up every day. I like challenges. I like having a positive outlook on things. I like to see the opportunity in every problem. And that's what keeps me going every day.
Andrew also shares his experiences to improve the industries in which he operates. His book on logging and code of practice in collaboration with EU Forestry Commission is only one aspect that shows how genuinely invested he is in modernizing the business sector operations in Guyana as a whole.
None have got to the standard that we're at in such a short space of time. You know, we're not selfish in what we do. So we try to help other companies, say, you know, by being open with them, come and see what we do, how we do it, try to get an understanding of why we made certain decisions and why we did things a certain way. When we share amongst each other, we grow learning from each other. So the concept is, you know, I don't have to pay to learn anymore. I can listen and learn. And I think that's the example that I think we all need to follow, because we keep ourselves poorer if we're selfish.
The desire to rebel against the status quo and the ability to see things differently is as present in the Guyanese hinterlands as it is in the halls of academia. Dr. Shireen Hack, 2020 Laureate for Science and Technology, an astronomer from the University of the West Indies, looked at the world in a different way from childhood, and that vision has guided her throughout her life.
my earliest memories that I actually recall is watching the sky over us in a village and thinking that lights in a bowl. It's like a bowl over us. As far as I could remember, I was always enchanted with the skies, and that made me gravitate towards books. So wherever I could get my hands on, for my 16th birthday, I begged for subscription to a magazine called Astronomy. So I went to high school and I ended up in the science stream. But apart from whatever we were doing in the normal school curriculum, I always had this interest outside of it, and I would be buying books. If there's anything I could really mention, it was sometimes I couldn't afford a book and I would hide it in the bookstore until I'd saved up enough to get it, and luckily, hopefully, it'll still be where it wasn't supposed to be. So my father had a pair of binoculars that would be around, and I took the binoculars and I looked up at the moon at around age 9, and like I say, I never looked back down.
But transforming her childhood passion into a viable career was difficult.
So I actually did apply to engineering because honestly it was the right thing to do, and I didn't get in. And at the moment I may have been devastated, but looking back now, it's the best thing that ever happened. I went to UE, right, Natural Sciences, and my degree was a major in physics. And after that, the calling remained. I wanted to do astronomy. But anyway I turned, everyone told me, you're not going to get a job with that. You can't do astronomy in Trinidad, right?
Dr. Hack persevered despite the negativity and pursued her studies in astronomy abroad, after which she was presented with an opportunity to lecture at the University of the West Indies, where she continues to keep her classes and students on the pulse with internationally emerging discoveries and findings.
When I was doing my PhD, if you take up a very old textbook in astronomy, you're not even going to find a topic called astrobiology. You take up a current one, they will all have it. So it's a cutting-edge field that developed over the period that I've been involved in astronomy. It's a huge question, and it's one of the big things now, life in the universe. So what could we in Trinidad contribute to such a big question like that? Now, Mars has features like mud volcanoes. So we can't quite go to Mars right now and do testing, but we could go down to the mud volcanoes and see what kind of environment it was regarding whether it was conducive to life. Similarly with the Pitch Lake. Now, the mud volcanoes act as an analog for Mars, but the Pitch Lake, Titan, which is Saturn's largest moon, has an abundance of hydrocarbon lakes. And guess who else has an abundance of hydrocarbon lake? Us in Trinidad.
Dr. Hack has also chaired the national committee coordinating the historical event of the first celestial objects to be locally named, the planet and star Dingole and Ramajay. This has put the Caribbean on the map in the global field of astronomy, along with many of her other achievements, such as the Observatory Project in collaboration with Finland.
So one of the projects that we got started with was establishing an observatory here. There was, and to date, there is no research-grade observatory in the English-speaking Caribbean. And you had to be everything. You had to be project manager, you had to be architect, you had to be software engineer to make this thing happen. Why were we doing this? Well, it was a project we got involved with Finland, but they are 60 degrees north. So they were monitoring quasar, which is a black hole kind of system. And when it went below the horizon, they couldn't see it. So guess who could see it? Us, conveniently placed close to the equator, could see it when Finland couldn't. So we took over the observation when it was needed at those times.
She has been affiliated with many international organizations, worked together with them in the area of research, in particular radio astronomy, where recently she has been able to team up with almost 12 universities from North America to apply for a very large grant in order to bring radio astronomy to the Caribbean, in particular Trinidad and Tobago.
Aside from all her accomplishments, she takes an eager interest in educating persons interested in the field.
Which is what I heard all my life. You can't do astronomy here. What use is it of here? But what is it that we can do with it? Astronomy is like the queen of the sciences that brings all mathematics, physics, chemistry, and now even biology. So one of the beauty about astronomy and relevance to our people is that it gives you transferable skills. So anyone trained in astronomy, you learn amazing skills. You learn image processing, you learn coding, you learn to do all what are called the STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematical skills, which are definitely transferable. And guess what? You have a lot of fun while learning all of that. What advice I would give to my younger self? You know, one of the things about humans is that we are very afraid of the unknown. And when you're young, the future looms large and unknown. So if there was anything I could tell my younger self, it will be to not be afraid and take a chance on life.
The need for inspiration does not seem to be a problem for motivated people like Dr. Hack. But for much of humanity, inspiration and motivation come from artists who show them the world in ways they could not see themselves. One such person is Jallim Eudovic of St. Lucia, 2020 laureate in the field of arts and letters.
I was totally unaware of this until I was about 5 years old. But prior to my awareness of my surroundings and so on, I was always very, very fascinated with nature, puddles of water, wood grain, just about everything. I was that daydreaming kid. So by the time I came around to discovering that that I was literally growing up in an art studio. But when I left St. Mary's College in 1999, I had an option to go to university, college, or to stay with my father. And my father was already probably approaching his 60s, by that time. And he being such a brilliant artist, I decided to stay with him.
In working with his father, he began to get exposure as his ability developed and soon enough began to explore his own style.
My most, I would say, seminal moment came when I went to Africa, because that's where I sort of broke away from my dad's style. Because up until that point, I was sort of in his shadows, parroting his style. Developing my own voice, yes, but not fast enough. But when I went to Africa, what I found was unbridled creativity, without apology and without excuse. And in our part of the world, we make a lot of excuses for not doing. So when I came back to St. Lucia, I wanted my work to have a different voice, to have a different narrative, to have to impact on a global conversation. I wanted to be part of a global network of thinkers and of creators. So I immediately went to the drawing board and I conceptualized a new style for myself, and it was sort of stylized, realism, I will call it.
This discovery of his own voice evolved, with his Caribbean influence playing a major role.
My art reflects my community and the aspirations of my community. When I say community, I don't mean a community with a small c. I mean my international, diasporic community. As a black man, in the world, as a Caribbean man in the world, as a multicultural man as well, because as Caribbean people we are all these things. It's very important how we project ourselves and how we self-determine and how we self-actualize. And to me, these issues are very important. So I use my art to empower and to sort of visually project our path into the future. One of my most important collections was called Kudme. Now, in St. Lucia we are bilingual, so we speak a French Creole and a English. So Kudme is a French Creole term which literally means like a lash of the hands, or a coup de main, or helping hands. So it's a village tradition where if someone wants to build a house, they don't build it alone. They don't need money either. All you need is to provide the materials and some good food and some good alcohol, and the entire community will come to your rescue and literally help you build that house. And it will be accompanied by drum beating, storytelling, comedy is a very rich part of our tradition.
Us is well renowned in the international arena. In terms of the local citizens, last year we celebrated our 40th anniversary of independence. And Jallim was the one who really captured the essence of our independence celebrations for us in sculpture, in a monument, depicting our theme, All In. So appropriate on the waterfront, you cannot miss it, as you go by our waterfront. And, it was just testimony, to the quality of work that he does internationally and from whence he came, because he's from a family of talented artists.
Jallim's style is also now appreciated beyond the borders of St. Lucia.
He's also, what I admire about his work, again, he's a thinking artist. He did this monument, which he asked me to write a poem to, which is now in downtown Castries. The original name was Boat of Dreams, which I prefer. It's now called All In. But again, you look at the vision encapsulated as he imagined the first fathers coming to these islands and his whole structuring of the piece. I find that unique, fresher vision. And his handling, he's become famous. Let's not fool ourselves. He's well known as far as China. Much of his work is there in UK, in the US.
So I went to Canada. I also went to Martinique several times. And I would say Martinique is like France back door, next door to us. It was very, instrumental in my development as well. Then I went to Africa. I went to France, England, New York, Miami, so I have traveled the world essentially. Art is the emissary of the very ethos of our human society and is our species' greatest proclamation of self and aspiration. It is therefore upon this foundation that my desires for my work is steeped on. So I would say to first find your purpose and discover what or who you would like to advocate on behalf of with your work. Figure out what you would like your message to be, and your style will organically emerge from that approach.
What these four exceptional people have in common is that they are part of the Caribbean reality. For many years, their efforts went unrecognized. The Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards, however, has changed all of that. These four remarkable individuals who have persevered against the odds and made the impossible possible is a lesson to us all that where there is a will, there is a way.